if you would, is the genesis of Stargazer. What started you writing it? Where did that interest come from? Uh, just talk a little bit about this new wonderful book that we all are in love with.
Oh, thank you, Susan. And thank you for this opportunity. I have to say, Peregrine Books is one of my all-time favorite bookstores ever in the United States. Whenever I get to Prescott, I always love to stop in there. And whenever I've been lucky enough to give a talk there, I've been so amazed and humbled and delighted at how many people come to your store to hear me. So thank you so much for all those wonderful opportunities. So, well, the origin of Stargazer, actually, I think the idea was born when I was working on the book before this, the Tale Teller. And that book, as you may remember, included a lot of references to what's known as the Long Walk, the Navajo people's removal from their sacred land. They were forced down to a concentration camp in an area known as Bosque Redondo. And then after that, most of the Navajo people moved back to what became the big reservation. But there were a couple bands that sort of established little islands of Navajo culture, other places in New Mexico. And one of those little islands is a community called the Alamo Navajo Reservation. So as I was doing the research on the Long Walk, I thought how interesting it is that these Navajo clans decided to settle here instead of going back to where their initial homeland had been. So that was the idea of including those people in a book, was one of the ideas that led to Stargazer. And the other had to do with geography. When I went to do my research on the Alamo Navajo, I realized that their community was maybe an hour from a astronomy facility known as the Very Large Array. And I thought how interesting it would be to have a mystery that tied in the science of astronomy with some Navajo cultural elements. So I think those two were probably the core ideas that led to Stargazer. And the other thing that I had been thinking about a lot were, how can I say this? The idea of lying, and the idea of lies that we tell to protect people, that we maybe tell to protect our own egos, or that aren't really meant maliciously, but they're not quite the truth. And so I was thinking, what if Bernadette Manuelito ended up in some kind of a situation where she was, let's say, the victim of some of those lies, and how would she react? So I think those three were kind of the seminal ideas that led to the inspiration for Stargazer. And then, of course, I think like most creative projects, once I started working on it, a lot more ideas came to me, and some of which actually made it into the book, and some of which kind of rattled around in my brain and then sort of moved on to be in another book, or to just be in limbo until I figure out what to do with them. So that's a long answer to your question.
Well, that's a good answer. I love your thorough answers. That really help, because there's a lot going on that we as readers don't see and love to hear about. I'm also wondering, you have such extensive information about the different the constellations and how they work into or fit into the philosophy, the Dene philosophy, and the places that they highlight. And I wondered, how do you do that?
Oh, I was so lucky. There's a wonderful book about Navajo star lore. And I wish I had here, I would show it to you, but I will afterwards. I'll send you an email and you can pass it on to your readers. I can't remember the name of it. Sorry. Anyway, it talks a lot about Navajo star lore. It was written I think for use in junior high and high school, which was about the level of my knowledge of astronomy. So it's really a wonderful book, and it compares Navajo constellations to those Greek and Roman constellations that a lot of us people who are of a certain age probably learned about in school. So that book was a huge, huge help to me. And the other thing that really helped is just living here in our beautiful Southwest, where we're still lucky enough to have clear night skies, so I could go outside and see the Milky Way and see the Big Dipper and see Orion and the Pleiades. And then because of this book on Navajo star lore, I could also see those constellations and see how the Navajo constellations in general are a lot larger than the constellations that we're used to in Western astronomy. So I could see the Pleiades and then see how it was kind of part of this bigger picture that, say, Navajo people years ago who were maybe outside with their sheep in the summer looking up at that beautiful sky, those constellations that they would see. So that was so much fun for me. And the other thing that was really educational and a lot of fun was taking a tour of the Very Large Array, that astronomy facility that's near Socorro, New Mexico. They have dozens of big radio telescopes that are mounted on railroad tracks, so they can adjust them in different Y shapes to listen to radio waves that are coming from different parts of space.
Wow.
And the Very Large Array was one of the very first facilities to discover black holes. And since then, they've done so much really, really interesting work. So sort of the combination of Navajo culture and then all of this wonderful science that has to do with the night skies, those two things sort of came together to help me write The Stargazer.
Well, whatever came together very well. So thank you for the lovely read and all the knowledge. And in that, along that line, you seem to have a very firm grasp of the whole Dene culture as that's so place-based, and that the Dene people, their stories are connected to place. I mean, that shows up in your novel in several places, every novel, but this one in particular, I thought. And talk a little bit about that, and how, is this something you've discovered more about, or you knew from early work talking to your dad, or so talk about that if you would.
Okay, well, you're right. Every book really does have a lot of place in it, and some of that came from my dad. One of my dad's sort of founding principles when he started this series 50 years ago was to always set the stories on the Navajo Nation. And so when I put on my big girl boots and decided maybe I would try to write a mystery starting with Spider Woman's daughter, one thing that I really wanted to do was to take the readers to a different part of the Navajo Nation. So that was another thing that inspired me to write Stargazer. That island of Navajo culture in central New Mexico was a place that Dad had never written about. And one thing that I really love about Dene culture is that all of the important sites also come with wonderful stories. So, for instance, Bernie in this book, because she's still based as a police officer, she's still based in Shiprock, but now she has this assignment that takes her east and south down to the Socorro, New Mexico country. Every time she makes that drive, she sees Mount Taylor, which is one of the 4 sacred mountains of the Navajo people. She drives through the big lava flow, which is connected with stories of the hero twins and how they killed monsters to make the world safe for all of us humans. So really the challenge, or one of the challenges for me, is to remember that I'm actually writing a mystery, and to try to kind of move the plot along, as I'm also able to talk a little bit about the scenery and about the Navajo culture that often goes with a lot of those landmarks.
Yes, and it's fascinating. So I'm really thrilled with what you did. And this, I don't know, for some reason, this book seemed to highlight that a lot. I've been also always appreciative of how you deepen characters, and you added Bernie, of course, and I felt like I was getting to know them better. But I felt in this book like I really know them well, and I know so much about them now. And I love some of the things you did that I better not talk about, because I don't want to do any spoiler things for people who haven't read the book. So that's only been out 3 days. And by the way, folks, we have signed copies that she's provided us with. So if you haven't got it in your clutches, get it, because they're going to go fast. But that whole idea of um, the relationships, and also the relationships within the department and with the FBI, and it's not all of a piece, but it kind of works that way. So would you mind telling me a little bit about how that's going, how it happened?
Well, sure. And I think that's one of the big differences, and one of the big changes that I made when I kind of reinvigorated this series after my dad died. I think some of it may have to do with being a woman, and just maybe paying a little more attention to relationships. But I think also my dad had set the stage with these wonderful characters. And so when I was able to write about them, I was able to just kind of maybe fill them in a little bit more. Besides being people of action, I also was able to expand on what their internal life was like, and what their emotional life was like. And I think particularly for Bernie, I was able to move her from being a rookie cop who is pretty good at her job, but mostly dad used her as kind of the love-struck girlfriend who brings Jim Chi coffee and drives him around when he breaks his foot, and is perhaps not a full-fledged professional police officer. When I took over the series, it seemed really clear to me that it was time for Bernie to rise up and be a full-fledged crime solver, just like Jim Chi and Joe Leaphorn. But I think, as all of us know, for a woman with a full-time job as a police officer, or a lawyer, or a doctor, or an artist, whatever the job is besides that job, most of us also always have the job of taking care of our kids, running the household, feeding the pets. I mean, all of that stuff that kind of that we just assume as women. And so I was able to really, I think, to round out the character of Bernie by adding those real life things, hopefully not making them too mundane, but trying to just incorporate them into the fabric of her life. And I think the same really was true with Jim Chi. Readers may remember that Joe Leaphorn had been in a relationship with a woman who is a teacher at Northern Arizona University. And I was able to have some fun with that relationship, and kind of speculate maybe on what happens when people are good friends and they've known each other for a long time, and perhaps they're ready to move on to another stage of that relationship. And that's kind of what happens in Stargazer. Let's see what other, and then also, I mean, anytime you write a book, you have your main cast of characters, and then you need to bring in the auxiliary people who will be specific for that book. So one of the joys and the challenges I had with Stargazer concerned the villain. And when I started, usually when I start the book, I have an idea. I don't do an outline, but I have an idea of what the crime will be and who has committed it. And some of the tools that Bernie or Chi or whoever is solving the crime will be able to use to figure out who done it. So in this book, I thought I had figured out who the villain was, but about 2/3 of the way through, it dawned on me that character was not the one who had committed the crime. So then I thought, so what am I going to do? Am I going to start over and, just, begin again? But then it dawned on me, if I was so bamboozled by this character, maybe the readers would be too. So instead of redoing the whole thing, I just went back and planted a few little clues here and there. And there was another character, meanwhile, who had who had a sinister side. So I was also able to plant a few more clues about that character. So I'm hoping that since I wasn't able to figure this out, maybe the reader won't figure it out either. And as you know, one of the challenges of talking about a mystery is to be able to say just enough so people get curious and feel, kind of satisfied that they understand what the book is about, but not so much that they don't want to read it to figure out who done it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, it's amazing doing that. And I wondered about that because, well, I know your dad had said before that he didn't know who was going to have done it many times. And I wondered about that aspect with you. And this was very, very intricate in so many ways that I had thought, I wondered, and I kind of was like you, sure of someone who didn't turn out to be the one. So that was a very nice touch. By the way, your sound changed. Did your phone fall or?
Oh no, are you having trouble hearing me?
A little bit. When you're back, lean back. Let's get that.
Let me sit up a little closer. How's that? Is that better?
I think it's better when you're back. Try it again.
Okay, how's this?
That's better.
Okay, good.
Go figure, huh? Yeah, go ahead. Did you have something to add?
The other thing about this book, I mentioned that this book had to do, part of it has to do about lying. And one of the things, when I was thinking of it, I was thinking, gee, what if there was somebody who Bernie really knew, who had confessed to a crime? And Bernie thought, no, that can't be true. But the person was adamant that the person had committed it. How would Bernie, both as a friend and as a law enforcement officer, be able to move forward with that? So that was another thing, another question that kind of was in my mind as I was working on Stargazer. And I think part of that question came from my own experience. My dear husband had been living with dementia, and usually he was pretty sweet, but once in a while he would tap on his head and he would say, "You got to fix this." And as anybody knows who's lived with somebody with dementia, there's really nothing you can do to fix it. I mean, it's an awful, awful, awful disease.
Yes.
But I knew there was no reason to tell him that either. So I would say to him, "Yeah, you're right. I'll see what I can do. I'll look into it." I would, try to come up with whatever thing I could come up with to kind of ease his soul. And I think, and I'm not a very good liar, so I think that kind of practicing that, I guess you'd call it that kind of diversion, then made me think, well, what would it be like for Bernie to be dealing with somebody who maybe who was also not a very good liar, but wasn't going to admit it, and how would she, as a law enforcement person, try to work with that case? So anyway, that was another thing that kind of led to Stargazer. And the other thing, of course, was the pandemic. I mean, I had almost finished this book. It was really due to come out last year. And then because of the pandemic and because I had a new editor, we mutually decided that it was better to wait. And I'm really, really glad that we did wait. I think people are more, I think all of us are feeling more optimistic now, and I think it's a better time for the diversion of a new book. And I was really glad to have the extra time to refine the writing a little bit, to refine the story, to just make sure. I try to make sure that every book is really the best book I've written, and so that was my goal again with Stargazer. And so I very much appreciated having the extra time to do that.
Well, I think you succeeded because as far as I'm concerned, it's the best one yet. Of course, they just get better and better, and that's the case. Did you get, I know you're trying to help the sound work.
Well, and I've got now, my computer was not responding. All of a sudden now my computer has come on, but I'm going to turn it off since we're doing
it may be interfering now. I don't know. So we'll find out. Too bad it didn't work when we needed it.
I know, life is just full of challenges.
Yes.
Yeah. My fingers move because I'm trying to turn off this silly thing. Well, all right, we'll continue on here. Oh, I wanted to, if you don't mind, Susan, I had a couple little quotes that I'd like to read. Would that be okay? Could I read you a couple?
Passages? Yes, I was going to get to that, but the sooner the better, because we all love to hear you read.
Okay, well, as I was talking about liars, and one of the joys of writing about the landscape that I wrote about was that it gives Bernie a lot of time in the car, either to be thinking or to be talking to a suspect who she is delivering. So Bernie's taking this woman who's confessed down to Socorro, and that's about a 3-hour drive from Shiprock. So they have lots of time to talk, and Bernie's trying to get her to explain why she did it, if she did it, to basically talk her out of her confession. And I just wanted, the woman's name is Maya. So I wanted to read you this. This is a scene from when they're together in the car, and it doesn't give away too much of the story. Okay. Maya said, "What's going to happen when we get to Socorro?" "A bunch of paperwork. Then they'll put you in a cell. The detective handling the case will want to talk to you in the morning. You'll have to wait for an initial appearance and then a preliminary hearing. After that, it's up to the judge. But because you confessed to murder, I figure you'll have to stay in jail until the trial. Bail might be an option, but Bernie didn't say that. Do you think I'll get the death penalty? New Mexico abolished it years ago, and the Navajo Nation doesn't believe in it. In terms of your sentence, your motive for killing the man will make a difference. I shot him because he needed to die." Maya said it without any drama. "You can say that about a lot of people, but you didn't kill them. Not yet, anyway." Bernie laughed despite herself. "When did you learn to use a gun?" "A long time ago. My husband taught me in Hawaii. He said it might come in handy if I needed to defend myself." "And did you?" Maya left the question unanswered. So I had a lot of fun writing those scenes when they're in the car together, kind of showing Bernie's inner interrogator, and also showing this woman's reluctance to really defend herself against these big charges.
Mm-hmm. Yes, which is puzzling and frustrating for the reader as it is for Bernie. Yes.
One thing actually that gave me the idea for Stargazer, and readers who love Dad's work may remember this. One of Dad's books, kind of in the middle of his career, was a book called Coyote Waits. And in that book, Jim Chi has arrested this old man, and the old man, and there's a fellow policeman has been killed, and the old man says, "Yeah, I did it." And Jim Chi is convinced that this guy didn't do it. And he spends a lot of effort trying to prove that this guy is innocent. But in the end, it turns out that this guy actually did do it. So I don't want to say much more about that, but I just want to say that I thought Dad was really clever to do that and to kind of lead the readers along. I mean, we're so sure that Jim Chi is going to figure this out because we really trust Jim Chi. And then in the end, he figures out that he was wrong. So that was one thing that I loved that book. And that was one thing that gave me an idea for Stargazer.
Yes, yes. That's quite wonderful. Someone, Becky Ruffner, just complimented you for seeing for what you've done with Bernie, taking her out of the caretaking role and making her a professional in her own right. Which I don't know what I'd do if she wasn't, because, you know, I just love her and what you've done with her, that new role.
But you know, one thing that always makes me happy when I'm doing book signings at the Farmington Public Library or the Gallup Library, and there will be Navajo people in the audience. So often after those talks, say there's a teenage girl and her mom and then her grandmother, and they'll come up, and often one of the three ladies will say to me, you know, we're so glad to finally see a strong Navajo woman, you know, taking the lead and standing on her own feet and not just, you know, being somebody's girlfriend, but, you know, really acting like a professional person. And then they say, could we take our picture with you? And I always have to grin. It makes me feel like such a celebrity.
Enjoy it.
Yeah.
Well, one thing along the lines of some of what you've been saying, I wondered if you feel closer to your dad as you work through a novel in the writing of it. Is that part of it?
It is. It is. You know, it was funny. I never really thought much about writing a novel until my dad had died. And even then, I wasn't really thinking of it until my last nonfiction book was a book that had beautiful photos of the places that my dad loved. My late husband and I did that book, and we traveled all over Navajo country and took a lot of photographs of the actual sites that my dad used. And so then when that book came out, Don and I did a talk like this, and we showed the slides. And then we would ask the people in the audience if they had any questions. And every single time someone would say, so did Tony have another novel in the works, another book that maybe could be dusted off by the editor and, you know, put out so we would have more Jim Chi, Joe Leaphorn stories? And my dad really took care of business before he died. So I would have to say, no, sorry, you know, he didn't. And there isn't anything an editor could dust off. And then I could just read the disappointment in the face of the person who'd asked that question. And so often they'd say, well, gosh, I'm going to just have to read the whole series all over again. And honest to goodness, I must have heard that 50 times. And toward the end, I thought, well, darn, there's nothing I can do to bring my dad back. But I'm in the same boat as a lot of these readers. I'm already missing these characters. And I thought, well, you know, I had never written a novel, but maybe, you know, and it's partly inspired by my desire to not see Bernie languishing as the love-struck girlfriend. I thought maybe I could write a novel just to kind of give Bernie her due. And you know, one thing led to another, and I can't believe that this is the 6th one. And I just finished I shouldn't say finished. I sent number 7 off to my editor in New York. And so now I have fingers and toes crossed, hoping that she likes it.
Well, we all do too. And
Yeah.
hopefully maybe when this one comes out, maybe you can come talk to us in person.
Oh,
That
I would love that.
Lovely. Yeah. We
You know,
really
I
miss
think
you.
well, thanks. I love the opportunity that technology gives us to talk to people all over the country and to talk to people who maybe have trouble getting out of the house or, you know, don't like being in tight spaces or, you know, whatever. But but as an author and a speaker, there's just such energy being in a room with live people and seeing their reaction,
Yes.
and seeing them raise their hands if they have a question or whatever. I really miss that, and I'm glad that things are slowly getting back to normal, and we can look forward to doing that, hopefully for
Yeah,
the next book.
hopefully, yes.
Yeah.
And I would love to see, see us get some kind of a hybrid where you might be able to be streamed for people who still don't want to come out of the house or who they're far away. Um, I don't know if we can do that, but the way technology works, I don't see why not.
I
Yeah.
don't either. I think that would be great to do it, to have the best of both worlds.
Yes. Yes, I do too. I was wondering if you talked about your dad's, one of your favorite books of your dad's, and do you have any favorite of your own, or does it come and go with whatever you're writing? You, what's the situation there?
Well, usually the one that I'm working on at the moment is my favorite and simultaneously my least favorite. It's usually my least favorite when I'm working on that first draft, and I'm just, I
Mhm.
don't, I think maybe because I don't work from an outline, the first draft is really hard. And then
Uh-huh.
after that, once I have the basic shape of the story in place, then it's really just pure joy. I look forward every day to refining the story, refining the language, taking out the stuff that slows down the plot, and maybe adding in a little more nuance. So yeah, it's like saying, so which of your six children do you like the best? And one has a good sense of humor, and one is an athlete, and one has a big loving heart. So I really can't compare them. But I have to say, it was after Stargazer was finished, then I went to work on the other one, and so of course that one became my favorite baby. And then when I got back to thinking about Stargazer, doing the interviews for it and all, it was like all of a sudden there was this lovely little toddler who's saying, "Oh, here I am. Don't you love me?" And I'm pinching his little cheeks. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been, I really do like this book, and I love the cover. I'm gonna hold it up.
Oh, yes.
I
Isn't that special? I
I
love
think
it too.
I
Yes.
think of all the covers that HarperCollins has done for me, this is the one that really, it just really makes me smile. And this snake on the very front is an artist's version of the Navajo constellation Big Snake, which, I mean, it spans the whole sky. It's a fabulous, fabulous
Mhm.
constellation. So I was and also in this cover, if you look closely there in the background, you can see the telescopes from the Very Large Array. So,
Yes, I wondered about that.
yeah,
Yes, that's wonderful.
yeah.
Other than that place, do you have another place on the reservation or two places that you especially like to be?
Yeah, I love Canyon de Chelly. I mean, as you probably know, that's a very, very sacred landscape to the Navajo people, and it's really magic. It's so quiet and beautiful, and I know majestic isn't overused words, but it really is majestic. It's one of those places where I just kind of feel the good energy from being there. I love that, and I love Shiprock itself too. There's just
Mm-hmm.
something, I don't know, really special about Shiprock is a volcanic core, and to see it,
Mm-hmm.
rising up from the plains with all its rugged beauty, it just, yeah, makes me
Right,
really, really, I don't know, feel honored to be living in the Southwest where we have so much natural
mhm,
beauty all around us.
right. And I mean it's so nice that you can walk down, hike down into Canyon de Chelly especially. And it's that White House ruin is there. And you can, I don't know about driving up it in those big vehicles, but I know you can drive up with Navajo people and learn a lot about different things that you don't hear about otherwise.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
that's right.
magical. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's such a wonderful way to discover that landscape. Much, I know
right.
when I was growing up, uh, my mom and dad used to take me and my five brothers and sisters there, And back in those days, non-Indian people could just, drive in on their own. And I think the way they have it now is much better, because besides enjoying the landscape, you also get to hear the stories that make that
Yes,
place so
yes.
special.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stories make it special. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say the book that I just have
Yes,
maybe
tell us more about it.
it's part of one of the settings in it is Antelope Canyon, which is near Lake Powell. And it's part of the Navajo Nation. It's a beautiful, oh, it's hard to describe it. Kind of like a sandstone tunnel with a lot of different colors, where you can just imagine how the water and wind had shaped that wonderful, wonderful kind of underground landscape. It's close to my heart. And the other site that I use a lot in that book is Rainbow Bridge. And Rainbow Bridge was threatened by Lake Powell, but now that the lake level is lower, it seems to be better in terms of not being so threatened. But it's a really sacred spot for the Navajo and the Paiute and the Hopi and a lot of the tribes that live in the Four Corners. So it was to be able to write about that, and then to write about Lake Powell and all of the archaeology there that was buried when Glen Canyon was destroyed, and then so that's all that landscape is really wonderful too.
Yes, I'd love to have seen what got buried, wouldn't you?
I would have. One of the characters in this new book is an archaeologist who worked at Glen Canyon before Lake Powell came. So I'm able to have him do, reminisce a little bit about what he saw and how beautiful it was. I have to say though, I like Lake Powell too. I love the contrast between all that water and the desert landscape. Yeah, there's not much water in Stargazer, but there's a lot of stars, and there is some archaeology. So I think readers who like that will probably enjoy those sections of Stargazer.
Do you have a title for your new book, or is that still being decided?
Well, the working title is the Sacred Bridge, but that title came up before my editor had read it, and I gave her some alternative titles too. So we'll see.
We'll see. Yes, and we will be waiting to see. You said you might have another passage that you could read, because that's always something we all treasure.
Well, sure. Let me. So this is from. I'm looking to the side here because I have my book here. In most of my books, by the time with the exception of Spider Woman's Daughter, by the time the story opens, the murder victim is already dead. But so I thought in this book it would be kind of fun for the readers to get a glimpse of the victim before he's dead. So this is from the very first chapter, and I'm going to read you just a little bit of the opening, and then I'm going to skip a few pages and go to the end of it. Okay. He knew he was a lucky guy. First of all, how many people loved their jobs, made good money, and could honestly say that their work had changed the way people saw the world? He'd recently returned to a part of the planet he loved, a place where the night sky shone with brilliance. He was proud of their fine son, although he had to give his estranged wife and her brother credit for raising him. The woman he'd married 20 years ago remained lovely and engaging, and now that he'd moved closer to her, he could recapture her affection. His current girlfriend, a fellow scientist, was just a placeholder. That night's dinner date began encouragingly, two old friends catching up face to face. He sipped a glass of Cabernet, but she stayed with sparkling water. She'd asked about his work and listened with attention to the details of his research on black holes and gravity. He'd offered simplified versions of his latest discovery and a knotty issue with his colleagues. She posed interesting questions and laughed at his jokes. She mentioned how she enjoyed her own work and being close to family again. Her smile convinced him he could persuade her to give their relationship another chance. But as their dinner drew to a close, he began to have doubts. When he reached for the check, she said they should split the bill, and she didn't want to back down. The heat of her outrage over something he viewed as trivial stirred memories of other fights. She stomped out of the restaurant while he paid. The woman wasn't all sweetness. So I'm going to skip now. So now they're in the car. They have a little argument. And then he noticed her shifting in the seat next to him, her motion releasing a hint of perfume into the car's darkness. Was she getting ready to put her hand on his leg, to acquiesce? No, she seemed to be looking for something in her purse. New Mexico has no fault divorce. I filled out the papers and I brought a copy for you. A sudden tsunami of sadness washed over him, sweeping away his hope and leaving despair in its place. Stop it. I don't want a divorce. He raised his voice. When you agreed to dinner, I thought it meant something. It meant a meal shared with a friend. That's all. Can't you understand that? I thought you still loved me. At least I hoped you did. No. Her voice grew louder. I haven't been in love with you for a long, long time. You've got a girlfriend. You're a bright guy when it comes to looking at the stars, but not so much when it comes to dealing with people. Why do you always have to be so difficult? We should have divorced years ago. You're breaking my heart. Your boyfriend must have put you up to this. You have a boyfriend, don't you? That's none of your business. She spit out the words. I know you still care about me. I'm fighting you every step of the way. He clenched the steering wheel until he had his emotions under control. I could turn your life into living hell. Don't make me do that. The darkness hid his tears, but he knew she heard the ragged edge of desperation in his voice. You're pathetic. I don't have to take your craziness anymore. I'm finished with this and with you. That was when he remembered the gun. So
that's a very unforgettable part right at the beginning of this book.
Well, yes. I had fun with that. So
yes.
do we have time for one more?
Yo, absolutely.
Okay, well, let me see. I wanted to read you a little bit about Joe Leaphorn. Of course, Joe Leaphorn, the 50th anniversary of my dad creating Joe Leaphorn was last March. And I wanted to tell you guys, there's a wonderful writer who's writing a new biography of Tony Hillerman. University of Oklahoma Press is going to release it in October. And so he let me know that last March of 2020, was the 50th anniversary of the debut of Joe Leaphorn in The Blessing Ring. So it was like 2 days before the world shut down for COVID. We had a little party in honor of Joe Leaphorn. Anyway, of course, Joe Leaphorn has to be in every book. So Joe Leaphorn is in this book, and I'm just going to read you a tiny bit about a tiny question, a tiny excerpt. Okay. So Joe and his housemate Louisa, have been having a few difficulties, and Joe has decided he's going to try to butter her up a little bit by doing her a favor. Leaphorn realized that Louisa had forgotten the books she wanted to return to the library and took them with him, since it was on his way to the police station. He put the books on the seat next to him, moving the poster of the missing woman he'd been given in Gallup. Before he started his truck, he noticed someone parked across the street in the shadow of a Siberian elm. The car was hard to miss. The gray passenger door stood out from the deep green of the rest of the vehicle. The rear taillight was covered with thick plastic, and the front end looked like someone had backed a truck into it. He drove past, wondering who had parked there and why. The car looked empty, but when he checked the rearview mirror a few minutes later, it was behind his pickup, headed in the same direction. A person with a white ball cap sat at the wheel. Leaphorn pulled over, and the car behind him did the same. He waited. The other driver waited too, and Leaphorn felt his irritation rising. He always carried a gun, and in a situation like this, he was thankful for its reassurance. As he opened his truck door, the suspicious car pulled onto the road and drove away. He caught a better glimpse of the driver, a short man wearing sunglasses. He slammed the door shut and continued toward the police station. By the time he backed into a parking space with a visitor sign, he'd calmed down from greatly annoyed to moderately disturbed. So Leaphorn goes into the police station. He talks to his friend Carla. It seems like everything is going on fine. And then when he goes back outside, he sees something that he doesn't like to see. So he's coming back from the library here. He left the maps, returned the books, and walked outside. He noticed the suspicious green car again, parked a few spaces down from where he'd left his truck. The driver's door opened, a slim leg in a cowboy boot emerged. Remembering the woman in the sedan who'd nearly killed him with a gunshot a few years ago, he felt his adrenaline rise. He froze in place and put his hand on his gun. "Stop right there," Leaphorn yelled at the person in Navajo. "Lieutenant Leaphorn?" He could barely hear the quivering voice. "Speak up. Who are you?" "I'm Carla's son, Jonathan." "Carla?" It took him a moment to put it together. "The lady who works at police headquarters?" "Yes, sir. She's my auntie." "Jonathan, why were you parked outside my house? And why are you following me?" I can explain." The young man had a silver earring shaped like a long feather in the ear that wasn't covered by his hair. It moved as he spoke. "Go ahead, louder." "I didn't mean to make you mad. I just wanted to talk." "This isn't the way to do that. You could have gotten yourself shot. Do you have sawdust where your brain should be?" I'm sorry." The young man's confidence evaporated as quickly as Virga from a summer storm. A king-size van drove up and pulled into the spot next to Leaphorn's truck. Jonathan stared at it. Leaphorn softened his voice. "Talk about what?" Could we go somewhere more private?" "No." "Sir, it's kind of sensitive. My auntie..." The van's passenger window opened, and a woman started talking to Leaphorn, yelling, actually. "Hey, is that a museum over there?" "Yes," Leaphorn answered. "You speak English?" "When I have to." The woman looked startled and stopped shouting. "Is there a restaurant in there?" She pointed to the museum with her index finger. "No." While she spoke, the van's side door opened and a girl in white jeans stepped out, followed by a younger boy. "Mom, I told you, we should have stopped at McDonald's. You guys never listened to me." Jonathan spoke. "You'll find a good restaurant across the street and down a couple blocks at the hotel." A man said, "As long as we're here, we should take a look inside the museum. It wouldn't hurt you two to learn something." "Mommy, I'm hungry," the boy whined. The woman took the younger child's hand and they started toward the building. The girl glanced briefly at Leaphorn and then focused on Jonathan. "Are you guys Indians?" "Navajo," Jonathan said. "How about you?" The girl looked surprised. "No, I'm from Sacramento." "Well, welcome to Deneta, home of the Navajo." "Does Navajo mean Indian?" "Yes. Well, actually, it means the people." "I never met an Indian before. Do you have a horse?" "No, just that old car over there." "Maybe your granddad will buy you one." "I like your earring." "Thanks. The restaurant is right over there. You can go after the museum. They serve all afternoon." The father said, "Come on, sweetie. It's chilly out here." "Thanks for talking to me." She gave them both a shy smile. Jonathan smiled back. Leaphorn watched the girl walk off with her father. Maybe curious children held the hope for the world. So anyway, Leaphorn does okay in this book. Everybody will be happy to know I don't do any more damage to him.
I'm so glad. Yeah. But we do get to see deeper into him in quite lovely ways.
Thanks.
So thank you for that.
Thanks.
Well, I don't.
I wanted to say one other little
yes.
thing. You know, a lot of times writers get asked if they will donate what we call naming rights for, you know, some good cause. And so in this book, the New Mexico Children's Foundation asked me if I would do that donation. And the guy who bought it was a doctor. And by the time they had the auction, I was almost finished with the book. So I ended up naming a child after him. And at first he was kind of taken aback, but then I said, well, you know, this is a kid who gets to have a conversation with Joe Leaphorn. He said, oh, Joe Leaphorn, that was my favorite character. So I think he was okay with it. And the other one was a woman who was a patron for one of our rural libraries here, the Placitas, New Mexico Library. And she said, instead of using my name, get the name of the Placitas Library in this book. And that was kind of hard because it's far away from Navajo land, but because it was a library and because libraries have exchange programs, I was able to squeeze it in. So that was kind of fun, and it was more of a challenge than I thought it would be. But I was glad to be able to do that. And I think both of those, both the Placitas Library and the New Mexico Children's Foundation, you know, they made a little money by doing that. So it was really a win-win situation.
Yeah, that's really good to know about. I love to hear that. And I did notice the Las Placitas library in there.
Yeah. You know, if you ever have any causes in Prescott, I would be glad to make that donation too. That's one of my favorite towns in the world. So just so you guys know.
Thank you. We will think about it. I'm sure a lot of the people watching are also they're very active in town. So
I'm sure.
You might hear from us. I guess no one has any questions. This is what happens when the event is 3 days after the book comes out. And I'm kind of glad because people might be asking things in the book that would be spoilers, because that happens sometimes too.
Yeah.
But
well, you know, when I get questions like that, I just say, well, that's a good question, and that's why they call it a mystery.
Yeah, and that's true. Can't do better than that.
Yeah.
Well, folks, I'm telling you that you want to hold that book up again because it sure stars it. Isn't that beautiful? I loved it.
I'm crazy about this cover.
Yes, I can tell. And I love it too. I mean, how could you not? And I had this read in I guess afternoon, evening, by noon the next day. So it is that kind of a book that you really don't want to put it down. If you're lucky, you don't have to stop and make excuses to everyone about why you're not doing things that you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you so much, Anne. Like I said, I do hope that we see you for your next book in person. If we don't, we'll see you this way. But
great.
Yeah. And it should be out in the next, you don't have any idea till they tell you whether, yeah.
Right. I'm hoping next spring. They seem to like to have me on the April release schedule.
The springly, yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping a year from now, maybe a year from now, we can all be together in your beautiful store.
Oh, well, we'll have a big celebration. Well,
Great.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, everyone. I'm so glad that you got to enjoy Anne's talk and reading, and we will see you when the new book comes out. Well, I'll see some of you for other events, but A lot of these people don't come for any appointment, but you.
Right. Well,
Bye
thank
now.
you. Thank you, Susan. And thanks to everyone who listened. I really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Oh, someone has ordered. Oh, well, bye.
Bye.